Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and today doing a branded Skull Servant deck profile. So I'm really excited to do this for you guys because this deck is an extremely fun deck to play that summons out an insanely powerful boss monster, King of the Skull Servants, which gets massive with this build. We can get it up to over 10,000 attack points to be able to OTK our opponent with. So without further ado, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards. Getting your name description every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your Patreon. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Skull Servant. This card is an extremely important 3-of in the deck that we're using to get in the graveyard so we can get our King of the Skull Servant to get absolutely massive. This card is a great combo piece in this build. We then play 3 copies of King of the Skull Servants. King of the Skull Servants is an amazing boss monster that has the ability this card's original attack becomes 1,000 times the number of King of the Skull Servant and Skull Servant in your graveyard, which can be absolutely crazy how many attack points you can actually get this card up to, because it's very easy to get multiple Skull Servants in the graveyard, especially with the effects of your copies of White Prince, making it very easy to get like 3 Skull Servants in the graveyard extremely quickly. Also, if this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can banish one other King of the Skull Servant or a Skull Servant from your graveyard to special summon this card, making it super easy to get it back on your side of the field. We then play 3 copies of the Lady in White. This card is great as a 3-of in the build because it does give you a little bit of protection, because face up level 3 or lower zombie type monsters that you control, except the Lady in White, cannot be destroyed by battle and are unaffected by the effects of spells and trap cards, which is a really cool ability. And this card is always treated as Skull Servant while in the graveyard, which is a great ability for this card to have, so we can have more names to be able to get our copy of King of the Skull Servant absolutely massive. We then play 3 copies of White Prince. White Prince is an amazing 3-of in this build, and this card is like absolutely crazy. It has the ability that if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can send 1 Skull Servant and the Lady in White from your hand or deck to the graveyard, which is a great ability to be able to do. I love that about this card, that it just instantly gets you 3 names in the graveyard, because it sends itself that counts as Skull Servant, Lady in White, and the original Skull Servant to the graveyard, giving you 3 cards, making this card a great branded fusion target. So you can send this to the grave, and once you do, you can send a copy of Skull Servant and Lady in White, giving you 3 names and also a boss monster on your side of the field. This card also has a great ability that you can banish 2 Skull Servants and this card from the grave to special summon King of the Skull Servant from the deck, which is such a cool ability. We then play 3 copies of White Baking. White Baking is really good as a 3-of in the deck, and I really like this card a lot because it has a great ability that this card's name becomes Skull Servant while it's in the graveyard, and if a level 3 or lower zombie monster you control would be destroyed by battle or by card effect, you can discard this card instead. And if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add 2 monsters with different names from your deck to your hand, except White Baking, that are either Skull Servant or specific list Skull Servant in its text. Then discard 1 card, which makes this card an amazing 3-of in the build, just to be able to send to the graveyard with a bunch of different effects in the deck. So you can search out a copy of, say, King of the Skull Servant and a copy of White Prince, and then discard the White Prince, being able to send your copy of Lady in White and your copy of Skull Servant to the graveyard off that ability, making this card one of the most powerful cards in the entire deck to help you get additional names in the grave. We then play 3 copies of White Princess. White Princess is basically walking Foolish Burial, and it's also a hand trap, which is really cool, because this card's name becomes Skull Servant while on the field or while in the graveyard, and as also the really cool ability, if it's normal or special summon, you can send 1 White Prince from your deck to the grave, which is a great ability just to get that card in the graveyard. Also, during either player's turn, you can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard, and all monsters currently on the field lose attack and defense equal to their own level / rank times 300, making it easier to OTK your opponent with King of the Skull Servant. We then play a single copy of White Mare. White Mare is just a good 1-of to recover your cards, because it has the ability, while this card's in the grave, is treated as Skull Servant, just like the rest of all of your other Skull Servant cards. And it also has the ability you can discard this card to activate one of these effects, to be able to pick one of your banished Skull Servant or White Mares and return it back to the grave, or pick one of your removed from play Lady in White or King of the Skull Servant and special summon it, which is a great ability just to have a copy of King of the Skull Servant banished so you can bring it back with this card. We then play 2 copies of Aluber. Aluber is really good to help us get to our branded package, and this card is great to be able to work with our copy of Branded Opening, because Branded Opening will let us discard one of our cards to the graveyard so we get another Skull Servant in the graveyard, and then we can use this card to be able to search out Branded Fusion, letting us get another Skull Servant to the graveyard, which is great because you can basically use Branded Fusion in this deck like a copy of Foolish Burial, which is really good. We then play 2 copies of Fallen of Albaz. Fallen of Albaz is great as a 2-of in the deck to be able to work with all of our different branded cards, especially Branded Fusion, because you need this card to help you go in for fusion plays. It's also walking super polymerization, which is really nice. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to start with a single copy of Monster Reborn. Monster Reborn is really good in this deck as a 1-of to basically just bring back your copy of King of the Skull Servant from the graveyard so that you can OTK your opponent. We then play a single copy of Foolish Burial. Foolish Burial is amazing in the deck to send cards like White Baking and your copy of your White Prince to the grave so you can get multiple names in the graveyard, which is just really good. We then play a single copy of 1 for 1. 1 for 1 is great because our boss monster is a level 1, making it super easy to summon your copy of King of the Skull Servant to your side of the field. This card is almost like an E-Telly for the deck. We then play a single copy of Branded in Red. Branded in Red is so we can make some really awesome fusion plays, especially going in for Guardian Chimera, so we can basically draw 2 and pop a card on the field, or pop 2 cards on the field and draw a card, which is just really good. I love this card in the deck and it helps out a lot in this build, especially to set it on your side of the field with the effect of Albion. We then play 2 copies of Burial from a Different Dimension. Burial from a Different Dimension works really well with our copy of White Prince, because White Prince does have to banish itself plus basically 2 other Skull Servants to be able to summon out King of the Skull Servant from the deck, and this card helps you put those 3 that you banished back in the grave so you have more names in the grave to make your copy of King of the Skull Servant get really, really big. We then play 3 copies of Allure of Darkness. Allure of Darkness is really good because we play so many darks in this deck, and this card just helps us draw into the exact cards that we need. We then play 3 copies of Branded Fusion. Branded Fusion is amazing because this card is basically Foolish Burial for the deck, because it lets you fusion summon into a really powerful fusion monster while also sending the materials from the deck to the graveyard, so you can send cards like White Baking and White Prince to the grave so you can get additional names in the grave, and Fallen of Albaz so you can step into some really powerful fusion monsters while also getting names in the graveyard for King of the Skull Servant, which is why I love this card in the deck and why it's a really spicy way to play Skull Servant. We then play 3 copies of Branded Opening. Branded Opening is really good because you get to discard a card to be able to special summon a copy of Aluber directly from your deck, so you can search out your copy of Branded Fusion, and I really like that about this card because it helps out a lot overall in the deck to help you discard something to the grave while also getting Aluber on the field while searching out your copy of Branded Fusion, because if you get a brick in your hand like the original Skull Servant, you can just discard it to the graveyard to turn it into a really powerful monster, which is just really cool. We then play 3 copies of Super Polymerization. We need to get to our opponent's life points really quickly, so this card helps out a lot overall in the deck to be able to basically just fuse our opponent's field away so that we can go in for game while also giving us a really awesome boss monster. I really like this card as a 3-of in the build because it helps out a lot in the deck overall to basically just break your opponent's board. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, guys, we're going to start off with 2 copies of Mirror Jade. Mirror Jade is what we're usually summoning when we use the effect of our Lubellion or our Albion, and this card is just an amazing boss monster overall. We then play a single copy of Lubellion. Lubellion's really good in the deck overall in this particular build to help you go in for more plays. It does require a dark monster plus Fallen of Albaz, so this is actually the one that we're going into the majority of the time. Plus it helps us discard cards to the graveyard so we can go in for more fusion plays, which is just really cool. I love that about this card because it just helps you get a card out of your hand to get it in the graveyard for more different names in the grave for your copy of King of the Skull Servant, while also stepping into something like a Mirror Jade. We then play 2 copies of Albion. Albion's great in this deck. You play 2 in this build because you play 1 to be able to fusion summon with, and 1 to send to the graveyard off of Mirror Jade, so you can set Branded in Red so you can go in for Guardian Chimera during your opponent's turn, which is just really, really nice. I love this card in the deck as a 2-of, and it helps out a lot. We then play a single copy of Guardian Chimera. Guardian Chimera is what we summon off the copy of our branded in red. And this card is amazing in the deck to help us just draw 2 and pop a card, or pop 2 cards and draw a card. And it's just an overall fantastic card. We then play a single copy of Dracos Tapalia. Dracos Tapalia is great in the deck because it's a walking negate. We play a single copy of Garua and a single copy of Muddragon. These cards are basically just super poly targets. All 3 of these are, which is just really helpful about this particular build, just to help us go in for more fusion plays using our copies of super polymerization so we can break our opponent's board and go in with King of the Skull Servant. We then play a single copy of Nightmare Phoenix. This is just a pop back row. It's really good in the deck overall, just a pop back row. You don't link summon a whole lot in this particular build. You're mainly going in for the fusion plays with Branded Fusion and summoning out King of the Skull Servant to OTK. So that basically the link monsters are just toolbox. We play a single copy of SP Little Knight. SP Little Knight is just insane in just about any deck. You can change this card out for Nightmare Unicorn if you want a more budget option, but it's still a really good card overall as a double disruption. We then play a single copy of IP Masquerena. IP is really good to go in for your copy of SP Little Knight because they combo together extremely well to be able to make your copy of SP Little Knight during the opponent's turn and basically target a card on their field or in their grave and banish it, which is just really insane. You play a single copy of Link Spider. If you do draw into 2 copies of Skull Servant, you can normal one, make a Link Spider, and then normal the other one to your side of the field off the effect of Link Spider, or special summon it off of Link Spider's ability, and then link them both away for something like a copy of your Nightmare Phoenix, or even like a copy of SP if you want to, which is an option for you guys. We then play a single copy of Linkuriboh. Linkuriboh is amazing because we are playing primarily level 1s in this deck, so this card is really good overall. Then we play a single copy of Relinquished Anima because it helps us get cards off the field so we can basically just gobble them up and take control of them, which is just insane. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. This deck is super fun to be able to play. If you guys have never played Skull Servant before, you guys should definitely give the branded package a chance in this deck because it's super fun to be able to do, especially since you're basically just using Branded Fusion as like a foolish burial for the deck, and it helps out a lot overall in this particular build to be able to just get those copies of your Skull Servant to the graveyard so you can get copies of like White Baking or White Prince to the grave. So that's going to do it for this one, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell in there so you can become part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.